There is a kind of silence that only comes after you have lost something you can never get back. Not the silence of peace. Not the silence of rest. But the silence of a house that used to have a heartbeat in it, and now it doesn't. That is where our story begins. Not with a celebration. Not with a champagne toast. But with a man sitting alone in a mansion worth $3 million, staring at a yellow envelope on his kitchen counter. Inside that envelope was a letter. And that letter, written in the handwriting of a woman he had thrown out into the rain 7 months earlier, would become the most painful thing he would ever read in his life. His name is Marcus Webb. And by the time you hear everything that happened, you will not be able to stop thinking about the people in your own life who love you quietly, who carry you without ever asking you to notice. Before we go any further, before we dive deeper into what happened to Marcus and the woman who gave him everything, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and let us know where you are watching from. We truly love hearing from our community all over the world. And if you are new here, please click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Because every single week, we bring you real, human stories that will make you feel something. Alright. Let us go back to the beginning. Marcus Webb grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a 2-bedroom house where the heat cut off in January because the bills didn't get paid on time. His father worked at a bottling plant for 31 years and never once complained about it. His mother cleaned offices downtown on weekday evenings and came home smelling like bleach and floor wax. Marcus watched all of that growing up and made himself one promise: he was going to build something. He did not know what. He did not know how. But he was going to build something that mattered. By the time he was 24, he was working 2 jobs, taking online business courses at night, and eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 times a week. He was exhausted, broke, and absolutely convinced he was on the edge of a breakthrough. And then he met Christine. Christine Holloway was a nurse at Mercy General Hospital. She was not flashy. She did not wear designer clothes or drive a nice car. She drove a 2009 Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper that she had been meaning to fix for 2 years. She was warm, steady, and the kind of woman who remembered every birthday of every person she cared about. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a way of listening to people, really listening, that made you feel like the most important person on earth. Marcus met her at a mutual friend's cookout on a hot Saturday in August. He was wearing a t-shirt with a small hole in the collar. She did not care. They talked for 4 hours that night, standing by the fence while everyone else danced. He told her about his plans. His ideas. His vision for a logistics software company that would help small businesses manage delivery routes more efficiently. Most people had heard that pitch and smiled politely. Christine leaned forward and said, "Okay, but what's the thing nobody has thought of yet in that space?" He stared at her. She asked him questions nobody else had ever asked. That was the night Marcus Webb fell completely in love. They married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a botanical garden just outside Columbus. 43 people attended. Christine wore a cream dress she bought on sale. Marcus cried when he saw her walk down the aisle, not because it was expected, but because he genuinely could not believe someone like her had chosen someone like him. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati where the pipes banged every morning and the upstairs neighbor walked like he was wearing boots made of concrete. But they laughed about it. They cooked together on Sunday evenings. They made lists on the back of envelopes, goals, dreams, timelines. Christine was a full partner in his vision, even though her name appeared nowhere in the business documents. She worked double shifts at the hospital to cover their rent during the months when Marcus's startup produced nothing but hope. She transferred $10,000 from her personal savings, money she had been putting away since she was 19, into his business account when a supplier threatened to pull out over an unpaid invoice. She did it without drama. Without negotiation. She just did it because she believed in him. The early years of Webb Logistics Solutions were a grind that most people would not have survived. Marcus pitched investors 51 times before one of them said yes. He lost 2 major contracts in the same month and barely slept for a week. Christine sat beside him at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, helping him rewrite his pitch deck, circling the parts that were unclear, pushing him to sharpen his message. She never once said maybe this is not going to work. Not once. She always said, let us figure out what is missing and fix it. There is a particular kind of courage in that, the courage of believing in someone else's dream so completely that you make it your own, even when it costs you. Christine had that courage. And for a long time, Marcus saw it. He appreciated it. He told her often. But success has a way of rewriting the story you tell yourself about how you got there. And Marcus was about to learn that the hard way. By the time Marcus was 37, Web Logistics Solutions had grown from 2 employees working out of a spare bedroom into a company with 68 employees, offices in Cincinnati and Nashville, and annual contracts worth just over $9 million. They had moved into a beautiful home in a good neighborhood. Christine had left nursing to manage the home and help Marcus with business operations, scheduling, client communications, vendor relationships. She was, in every practical sense, the spine of the operation. She just never demanded credit for it, which turned out to be a mistake she could not have predicted. Because the people entering Marcus's world at that level did not know Christine's story. They saw a quiet, heavy-set woman who stood in the background at events while her husband worked the room. They did not see the decade of sacrifice behind her. They did not know her name was in the original business plan. They only saw the surface. And slowly, the people around Marcus began to reflect that surface back to him, until he started to see his own wife the way strangers did. They married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a botanical garden just outside Columbus. 43 people attended. Christine wore a cream dress she bought on sale. Marcus cried when he saw her walk down the aisle, not because it was expected, but because he genuinely could not believe someone like her had chosen someone like him. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati where the pipes banged every morning and the upstairs neighbor walked like he was wearing boots made of concrete. But they laughed about it. They cooked together on Sunday evenings. They made lists on the back of envelopes, goals, dreams, timelines. Christine was a full partner in his vision, even though her name appeared nowhere in the business documents. She worked double shifts at the hospital to cover their rent during the months when Marcus's startup produced nothing but hope. She transferred $10,000 from her personal savings, money she had been putting away since she was 19, into his business account when a supplier threatened to pull out over an unpaid invoice. She did it without drama. Without negotiation. She just did it because she believed in him. The early years of Web Logistics Solutions were a grind that most people would not have survived. Marcus pitched investors 51 times before one of them said yes. He lost 2 major contracts in the same month and barely slept for a week. Christine sat beside him at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, helping him rewrite his pitch deck, circling the parts that were unclear, pushing him to sharpen his message. She never once said maybe this is not going to work. Not once. She always said, let us figure out what is missing and fix it. There is a particular kind of courage in that, the courage of believing in someone else's dream so completely that you make it your own, even when it costs you. Christine had that courage. And for a long time, Marcus saw it. He appreciated it. He told her often. But success has a way of rewriting the story you tell yourself about how you got there. And Marcus was about to learn that the hard way. By the time Marcus was 37, Web Logistics Solutions had grown from 2 employees working out of a spare bedroom into a company with 68 employees, offices in Cincinnati and Nashville, and annual contracts worth just over $9 million. They had moved into a beautiful home in a good neighborhood. Christine had left nursing to manage the home and help Marcus with business operations, scheduling, client communications, vendor relationships. She was, in every practical sense, the spine of the operation. She just never demanded credit for it, which turned out to be a mistake she could not have predicted. Because the people entering Marcus's world at that level did not know Christine's story. They saw a quiet, heavy-set woman who stood in the background at events while her husband worked the room. They did not see the decade of sacrifice behind her. They did not know her name was in the original business plan. They only saw the surface. And slowly, the people around Marcus began to reflect that surface back to him, until he started to see his own wife the way strangers did. It started with small things. A business associate made a comment at a dinner event about Marcus needing to elevate his public presence now that the company was growing. Another investor's wife pulled Marcus aside at a charity gala and told him, in a voice dripping with false concern, that image mattered at this level. Marcus laughed it off the first time. The second time, he stayed quiet. The third time, he started looking at Christine differently, not the way a husband looks at his wife, but the way an insecure man looks at something he is afraid might be holding him back. And that quiet shift in his eyes was the beginning of the end. He started attending more events without her. He started coming home later. He started responding to her questions about the business with one-word answers, as if she was an outsider who did not need to know. Christine noticed every single change. She did not make scenes. She asked him one evening, gently, over dinner, "Marcus, have I done something? Are we okay?" He said they were fine. He looked at his phone while he said it. Then came the deal that changed everything. A major national supply chain company out of Atlanta approached Web Logistics Solutions about an acquisition partnership. After 8 months of negotiations, Marcus signed a contract worth $40 million. It was legitimate. It was extraordinary. It was the single biggest moment of his professional life. The celebration dinner was held at a rooftop restaurant in downtown Cincinnati. 60 people. Open bar. His photo was taken 100 times that night. He stood in the center of every picture. Christine stood to the side in most of them, smiling, proud, quiet. She had ironed his shirt that morning. She had reminded him of 3 talking points his attorney had told him to mention during the signing. She had sent a handwritten thank you note to the lead attorney on the deal the week before, a gesture that the attorney later told a colleague he thought was the classiest thing he had encountered in 20 years of deal-making. None of that was visible in the photographs. What happened over the 3 weeks after that signing is something Marcus has never fully been able to explain without pausing and looking away. He will tell you that something came over him. That the attention, the new attention, the powerful attention, the kind that comes when $40 million has your name on it, felt like a drug. And like most drugs, it convinced him that the life he had before was smaller than it actually was. He began picking fights with Christine over nothing. The house was too quiet. She dressed too plainly. She did not excite him anymore. She was not the woman for the life he was building now. Every one of those thoughts was a lie. But he had been hearing a version of those lies whispered by the wrong people for long enough that they had started to feel like his own conclusions. One night in October, after a heated argument that began over something as trivial as a missed calendar event, Marcus said things to Christine that no person who loves someone should ever say. He told her she had let herself go. He told her she embarrassed him. He told her she belonged to the old version of his life, not this one. And then he told her to leave. Christine did not scream. She did not throw anything. She went upstairs, packed 2 suitcases methodically, and came back downstairs carrying them with both hands. She paused at the front door. She turned around and looked at Marcus for a long moment, the way you look at something you are committing to memory because you know you will never see it again. And she said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Marcus. I really do." Then she walked out. The door closed behind her. And Marcus stood in his kitchen, $40 million contract on his desk, empty house around him, and told himself he felt free. He did not feel free for long. The first thing that unraveled was the household. It sounds almost embarrassingly mundane, but it is one of the truest details of this story. Christine had been managing the structural reality of their life for over a decade: the accountant contacts, the insurance renewals, the vendor contracts tied to the house, the property tax calendar, the personal banking, the communication with the cleaning service and the groundskeeper, the follow-up emails with his attorney that Marcus never had time for. When she left, all of it sat untouched. Within the first month, Marcus missed a property insurance renewal deadline and incurred a penalty. His personal accountant called to say that 3 documents Christine had always coordinated were now past due for the fiscal year filing. His attorney left 2 voicemails asking about a follow-up matter from the acquisition contract, follow-ups that Christine had been quietly tracking on a shared spreadsheet that Marcus had never once opened. He did not even know the spreadsheet existed until he went looking for a file and found it. 47 rows. Color-coded. Updated as recently as the day before she left. He sat in front of that spreadsheet for a long time. But that was not the moment the full truth hit him. That came 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon in November, when his company's new CFO flagged something unusual during a routine audit of business accounts from the previous 5 years. There were a series of wire transfers, 11 of them, spread across a period of roughly 6 years, that had come into the company from an external account during moments of serious financial stress. Some of those moments Marcus remembered vividly: the period when he nearly lost the Nashville office lease. The month a key technology partner had threatened to terminate their contract over a missed payment. The quarter when payroll had come within 4 days of being unmet. In every one of those situations, the company had pulled through. Marcus had attributed it to timing, to luck, to things stabilizing. He had never investigated where the stabilizing funds had come from. His CFO had now traced every single transfer to the same source, a private account in Christine Holloway Webb's name, funded through an inheritance she had received from her grandmother when she was 31 years old. The total across all 11 transfers was $437,000. She had never told him. She had never asked for it back. She had never even mentioned it. Marcus drove to the bank himself that afternoon. He needed to hear it from a person, not a spreadsheet. The branch manager confirmed everything. Quietly. Professionally. With just enough of a pause before speaking that Marcus understood the woman already knew the whole story and felt a particular kind of sadness about having to tell it to him. Marcus sat in the parking lot of that bank for 40 minutes. He could not go home. He could not make calls. He just sat there, trying to fit together the shape of what he had just learned with the shape of the man he thought he had been. They did not fit. The man he thought he had been was self-made. The man he actually was, the man Christine had quietly made possible, again and again, without a word, was something more complicated and humbling than that. He had called his wife an embarrassment. He had told her she belonged to his past. He had pointed to the door of the home she had helped build and told her to get out. And all of it, every dollar of it, every fighting day of it, had been possible because she was there. He tried to reach her that same evening. Her cell phone was disconnected. He called her sister in Cleveland, the call went to voicemail. He drove to the apartment of her closest friend, a woman named Deborah who had known Christine since college. Deborah opened the door, looked at Marcus for a moment, and said, "She told me you might come. She said to tell you she's okay. That's all I can give you." He stood on that porch for a moment and then asked quietly, "Does she hate me?" Deborah looked at him with the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from watching someone you love be treated badly for years. And she said, "Christine doesn't hate people, Marcus. That's the whole problem." He hired a private investigator 2 months later. Not to control her. Not out of obsession. He simply needed to know that she was all right. He needed to know she was safe and that she was somewhere warm and that she was not suffering for the choice he had forced her to make. The investigator reported back after 3 weeks. Christine was living in a small town in western North Carolina, in a rented house near a river. She had gone back to nursing. She was working at a community clinic. She had a garden. She walked every morning. She was, by every visible measure, rebuilding quietly and steadily, the same way she had always done everything. Marcus paid the investigator, closed the file, and did not ask for more information. He did not feel he had the right to know more than that. 7 months after the night she walked out, Marcus found an envelope in his mailbox with no return address. He recognized Christine's handwriting immediately. She had a very specific way of forming the letter M that he had always found beautiful without ever saying so. He sat at the kitchen table to open it. The letter inside was 3 pages, written by hand, in the same careful and unhurried way Christine did everything. She told him she was not writing to accuse him. She was writing because she needed to say a few things for herself, not for him, and because she hoped that someday, when the noise of all of this had settled, he would be able to sit with it honestly. She told him she had known about the financial transfers but had never brought them up because they were not a debt to her, they were a choice. She wrote, "I did not do those things to be owed. I did them because your success was something I believed in as much as you did. Maybe more, some days." She told him she had loved him from the version of him who ate cereal for dinner and stayed up until midnight reworking a pitch nobody wanted to hear. She told him that version of him was the one she had fallen in love with at that cookout in August all those years ago. And then, near the end of the letter, she wrote something Marcus has repeated to himself every day since: "You did not lose yourself when you became successful, Marcus. You lost yourself when you started believing that success was something you carried alone." She did not ask him to respond. She did not leave a phone number or an address. The letter ended simply, "Take care of yourself. The best version of you is still in there. I know it because I watched him fight for years to get here. Christine." Marcus Webb still lives in that house. The company is still running. The $40 million deal is still in effect. By every external measure, his life looks like a success. But the people who know him well will tell you that something is different now. He is more careful with his words. He listens longer before speaking. He has started attending a men's accountability group at a church near his home, not because anyone told him to, but because he realized he had spent years surrounding himself with people who reflected his ambitions back to him and not a single person who would tell him when he was wrong. His company now has a formal recognition policy for support staff and operational personnel, people who do the invisible work. His attorney says Marcus insisted on it personally. He said he wanted it written into the company culture that the people who hold things together behind the scenes are not invisible. They are the reason everything works. His team did not know why that mattered so much to him. He never explained it. He still has Christine's letter. It is in the top drawer of his nightstand. He has read it enough times that the paper has softened at the folds. He does not know where she is today. He has honored her request for space. But he thinks about what she wrote, about the best version of him still being in there. And on the nights when the house is very quiet and the weight of everything settles in, he holds on to that sentence like it is something fragile and precious. Because it is the kindest thing anyone has ever said about him. And it came from the woman he told to leave. Now here is what I want to ask you. And I want you to really sit with this question. Have you ever had someone in your life who believed in you so completely, so quietly, so without needing anything in return, that you did not even fully notice they were doing it? Someone who held things together while you were busy chasing the next thing. Someone whose name should have been on things it was never on. Think about that person. Think about whether they know, whether you have actually told them, what they mean to you. Because Marcus Webb will tell you himself, the saddest part of his story is not that he lost Christine. The saddest part is that he had years, to tell her what she was worth to him. And he waited until she was gone. And let me ask you something else, because I genuinely want to know what you think. If you were in Christine's position, if you had given a decade of yourself to someone, carried their dream as if it were your own, stayed quiet through all of it, and then one day they pointed to the door and told you to leave, what would you have done? Would you have fought? Would you have explained everything? Or would you have done what Christine did, picked up your bags, looked back one last time, and walked out with your dignity intact? Tell me in the comments. I want to read every single one of your answers. Because there is no wrong response to that question. There is only the truth of who you are and what you believe love should ask of a person. And if this story moved something in you, if it made you think of someone, or made you feel something you needed to feel, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Not because we are asking for views, but because some stories are medicine. And the right story, at the right time, can change the way a person sees their life. That is why we tell them. Subscribe if you have not already, and stay with us, because the next story we are bringing you is one that will stay with you for a very long time.